Hey there, my friend, and welcome. Today, you're not just going to hear a story. You're going to live inside the life of a man who started with absolutely nothing and became one of the most powerful minds in human history. This is the true story of a poor boy who had no college degree, no money, no fame, and no special help from anyone. But he changed the world with his curiosity, discipline, courage, and unstoppable mindset. His name was Benjamin Franklin. This is not just a history lesson. This is a life lesson. By the end of this story, you will learn how to believe in yourself when no one else does, how to train your mind like a genius, how to build something meaningful from nothing, how to turn your pain into power. And yes, you will also improve your English by listening to one of the greatest true stories ever told. So get ready, because this is not just a story. This is your transformation. Let's begin. Part 1. The beginning of a legend. 1706. Benjamin Franklin was born on January 17th, 1706 in Boston, Massachusetts. A time when America wasn't even a country yet. It was just a collection of British colonies. He was the 15th child in a family of 17 children. Yes, 17. His father, Josiah Franklin, was a soap and candle maker. His mother, Abiah Folger, was Josiah's second wife. The family was poor. They lived in a small, crowded house. There was no electricity, no schools like today, and no comforts. Every child had to work. Benjamin grew up surrounded by noise, work, and struggle. He had no toys, no luxuries, just books, chores, and curiosity. Benjamin's father wanted him to become a priest, so he sent him to school. But after just 2 years, the family couldn't afford to pay for school anymore. Benjamin was pulled out of school at age 10. Most people would give up, but not Ben. Even without school, he started teaching himself. He would read anything he could find, old books, newspapers, pamphlets. He especially loved books about science, philosophy, self-improvement, and how the world works. He used to borrow books and read them late into the night with a candle. He wasn't rich in money, but he was rich in hunger to learn. At age 10, Benjamin started working in his father's candle shop. He hated it. He didn't want to spend his life melting wax and dipping wicks. He wanted something more. His father noticed that Ben didn't enjoy the work, so he allowed him to try different trades. Eventually, at age 12, Benjamin became an apprentice to his older brother James, who owned a printing shop. This was a big turning point. In that small, dusty printing shop, Benjamin discovered his love for writing and words. He began reading and learning faster than anyone around him. He learned how to use a printing press, write articles, edit content, and express ideas powerfully. James started a newspaper called The New England Courant, one of the first independent newspapers in the colonies. Benjamin wanted to write for it, but James wouldn't allow him. He thought Ben was just a kid, so Benjamin did something brilliant. He created a fake name, Silence Doe Good, pretending to be a smart middle-aged woman. He secretly wrote 14 letters and slipped them under the print shop door. They were published in the newspaper, and readers loved them. Everyone wanted to know, Who is this silenced do-good? When James found out it was Benjamin, he was furious. He felt jealous, angry, and embarrassed, and their relationship began to break. Eventually, at age 17, Benjamin ran away from Boston to escape his brother's control. Benjamin had no money, no job, no connections. He left everything behind and walked over 300 kilometers to Philadelphia, sleeping on boats, begging for food, and surviving any way he could. He arrived in Philadelphia tired, dirty, and alone. He had only a few coins in his pocket, but he also had a mind full of ideas, a hunger to learn, a heart full of courage. No one knew it yet, but that boy who walked into Philadelphia would become one of the greatest men in world history. As he entered the city, tired and lost, he stopped at a bakery. He had 3 pennies. He bought 3 big rolls of bread, even though he couldn't eat them all. He walked down the street with 1 roll in each hand and 1 under his arm, looking like a funny, awkward boy. That's when a girl named Deborah Reed, standing at her front door, saw him for the first time. She laughed quietly. She didn't know that this hungry, strange-looking boy would one day become famous across the world, and one day, even her husband. Ben asked around and got a small job at a local printing shop, run by a man named Samuel Keimer. He worked hard, but he also watched, listened, and learned faster than anyone. Ben had a sharp mind, fast hands, and an unstoppable desire to be more than just a worker. He was disciplined. He woke up early. He read at night. He saved money. He practiced writing, logic, and public speaking in private. He didn't just want to earn money. He wanted to build his mind. Ben created his own reading schedule and read books on science, philosophy, politics, human behavior, business, ethics, religion. He didn't waste his evenings. While others played cards or drank in taverns, Benjamin would go home and read, write, and reflect. He believed, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. At age 21, Ben started something revolutionary. He formed a group called the Junto, a club of young working-class men who loved to read, think, and talk about big ideas. They met every Friday evening to discuss books, problems in society, inventions, ways to help the community, business and self-improvement. He built a community of learning long before schools were accessible for all. The Junto helped inspire libraries, schools, hospitals, and social change in Philadelphia. Ben wasn't just growing himself. He was lifting others. After gaining experience and saving money, Benjamin left Keimer's shop and started his own printing press with the help of a loan from a friend. This was risky. He was still young and unknown, but he had vision and skill. Soon his printing business started to grow. He printed pamphlets, legal papers, books, government contracts, and his own writing. Ben didn't just want profit. He wanted to print useful, meaningful ideas. In 1729, Benjamin Franklin bought a struggling newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette. Under his leadership, it became one of the most popular newspapers in the American colonies. He used the newspaper not just for news, but to share science, educate people, fight corruption, inspire thinking, and even make people laugh with clever humor and satire. Ben had turned ink and paper into power. In 1732, Benjamin created a small yearly publication called Poor Richard's Almanac. He wrote under the pen name Richard Saunders. It included weather forecasts, jokes, puzzles, advice, famous quotes, morals and life lessons, money-saving tips, wisdom about life, success, and character. Some of his legendary sayings: early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well done is better than well said. Lost time is never found again. A penny saved is a penny earned. The almanac became a massive hit, printed for 25 years, selling thousands of copies every year. It made Ben famous, rich, and respected. But more than that, it made the average person smarter. Benjamin eventually married Deborah Reed, the same girl who once laughed when she saw him walking with bread rolls years ago. Their marriage was not perfect, but it was real. They raised 2 sons and a daughter together. He now had a home, a business, and a growing legacy. But Benjamin Franklin was not finished. He had already become a successful writer, printer, businessman, and thinker. Next, he would become a great inventor, a visionary scientist, a public leader, and eventually, a founding father of an entire nation. Part 2. The inventor, the scientist, the genius. Benjamin Franklin was now a well-known writer, printer, and thinker in Philadelphia. But he was never satisfied. He didn't just want to make money. He wanted to understand how the world works. Most people in their 30s or 40s settle down. Not Franklin. This was the beginning of his scientific mind, and it would take him far beyond printing. He asked himself simple but powerful questions. What is electricity? Why does lightning strike? Can we store power? How does the human body work? Can we make life easier with inventions? And then, he started experimenting. In the 1740s, Franklin became fascinated by electricity. At that time, it was a mysterious force. People saw sparks or shocks, but no one truly understood it. There were no wires in homes, no light bulbs, no power stations. Electricity was something people feared or laughed about. A trick, not a tool. But Franklin believed it was something real, something natural, and maybe even something useful. He began performing experiments with glass rods, metal keys, Leyden jars, early batteries, silk cloth, wires and bells, static charges from rubbing materials. He wanted to learn what electricity truly is, not by guessing, but by doing. He was not a trained scientist. He didn't have a lab. He had no formal education, but he had curiosity, focus, and courage. Franklin didn't just do experiments. He helped shape the language of science. He created new words we still use today, such as battery, conductor, charge, positive and negative, for electrical currents. Electrician, he gave it its modern meaning. He was not just discovering, he was defining the invisible world of energy. In 1752, Franklin had a bold, risky idea. He believed that lightning was the same as electricity, but no one had proven it. People thought it was dangerous magic from the sky. Churches feared it. Scientists were unsure. So Franklin designed a now famous experiment. He flew a kite during a thunderstorm. But this was no ordinary kite. He attached a metal key to the string. The string ran through a silk ribbon for insulation. He held the string inside a safe, dry area, not out in the storm, as many people wrongly believe. As lightning passed through the clouds above, the key sparked, proving that lightning was pure electricity. This moment changed science forever. He could have been killed, but his careful setup saved him. And now, the world knew. Electricity is real, it's natural, and we can understand it. This made Franklin an international scientific celebrity, even before America was born. After proving that lightning was electricity, Franklin invented something that would save millions of lives: the lightning rod. Before this, buildings, especially tall ones like churches and barns, were constantly struck by lightning and caught fire. Franklin's invention gave lightning a safe path to the ground. It was a simple metal rod placed at the top of a building, connected by wire to the earth. This invention reduced death and destruction, made buildings safer, and showed that science can protect human life. Many religious leaders opposed it at first. They thought lightning was a punishment from God. But soon people realized Franklin's rod was saving lives, not challenging faith. Franklin never stopped inventing. He didn't create things to get rich. In fact, he never patented a single invention. He believed inventions should be shared freely to help humanity. Here are some of his most famous inventions. 1. Bifocal glasses. Franklin had trouble seeing both near and far. So he created bifocals, glasses with two lenses in one, so you can read and see distance without switching. Millions still use this today. 2. The Franklin stove. Homes used fireplaces for heat, but they wasted energy and caused smoke. Franklin invented a metal stove that used less wood, produced more heat, and kept homes warm safely. It was especially helpful for poor families. 3. Swim fins, flippers. As a child, Franklin loved swimming. He invented early hand paddles to help people move faster in water, an early version of swim fins. The long arm. He created a simple tool to grab books from high shelves. It was a wooden pole with a claw, useful, creative, and still used in new forms today. 5. Glass harmonica. Franklin loved music. He created a unique instrument using glass bowls that made beautiful sounds when played with wet fingers. Even Mozart and Beethoven composed music for it. Franklin's experiments weren't just local. He began writing letters to scientists in France, England, and Germany, sharing his results. He was elected into the Royal Society of London and many other academies, despite having no college degree. He received medals, awards, and letters of admiration from kings, philosophers, and scientists. People now called him the Newton of the New World. And yet, Franklin stayed humble. He said, "I never knew a man who was good at making excuses who was good at anything else." He continued to write and publish essays on human nature, science, morality, public improvement, philosophy. His ideas inspired readers to think for themselves, ask better questions, and become better citizens. He believed, reading makes you wise, writing makes you powerful, curiosity makes you grow, Discipline builds character. At this stage in life, Franklin had become a successful businessman, a respected scientist, a public servant, a loved family man, a friend to thinkers and leaders around the globe. And yet, his biggest role was still waiting. He would not just invent machines or words. He would help invent a new nation. By the late 1750s and early 1760s, Benjamin Franklin was no longer just a man of science. He had become one of the most respected minds in the entire British Empire. He had built a successful business, discovered the truth about electricity, created inventions that helped millions, written books and essays that shaped thought, connected with global leaders, kings, scientists, and thinkers. But he was about to face a new chapter, a chapter where his mind and his courage would be tested like never before. Because across the Atlantic Ocean, in the British colonies of America, a fire was starting, and Franklin would become one of the few men brave enough to face it. Let's understand the world Franklin was living in. 13 British colonies existed in America. All were ruled by King George III of Great Britain. These colonies paid taxes to Britain, but they had no voice in the British Parliament. People began to ask, why should we pay taxes if we don't have representation? Franklin understood this feeling. He had traveled between Philadelphia and London many times. He had spoken in front of kings, ministers, and wealthy leaders. He saw how the rich and powerful in Britain looked down on Americans. They called them rebels or uncivilized. Franklin, proud of his roots, began to feel divided inside. Am I a loyal subject of the king, or a voice for American liberty? In 1765, the British government passed the Stamp Act. This law forced American colonists to pay taxes on newspapers, legal documents, magazines, even playing cards. People were furious. This was not just about money. It was about freedom. They believed the British were treating them like slaves, not citizens. Franklin, who was in London at the time, was asked to defend the American people. And he did. In 1766, Franklin appeared before the British House of Commons, a powerful group of lawmakers. He stood alone in a huge hall surrounded by noblemen, officers, and critics. And he calmly explained why Americans were angry. He told them, Americans are loyal, but they want to be treated fairly. They believe in freedom, not forced control. They are willing to pay taxes, but only if they have representation. His speech was so powerful, so clear, so honest, that the Stamp Act was repealed, canceled, soon after. Franklin had won with words, not war. But the British still didn't respect the American colonies, and tension kept rising. Franklin loved peace. He tried everything he could to stop a war from happening. He sent letters, held meetings, spoke with ministers, warned both sides. But the British didn't listen, and Americans had had enough. In 1775, war began between Britain and the colonies. Guns were fired. People died. The American Revolution had begun, and Franklin knew it was time to stop being a messenger. It was time to become a revolutionary. In 1776, the colonies decided to break free from British rule. They chose a group of men to write a bold new document, the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin was one of them, alongside Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and others. If the revolution failed, every man who signed it would be hanged as a traitor. But Franklin stood firm. He believed in freedom, human rights, and equality. He famously said, "We must all hang together, or we shall surely hang separately." On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration was adopted. America was born, at least on paper. But the war was still raging. Now came one of Franklin's greatest challenges. America was fighting the most powerful army in the world, Britain. They needed help. They needed money. They needed France. So Franklin, now 70 years old, crossed the dangerous Atlantic Ocean to travel to France alone on a secret mission. His goal: convince the French king to support America, get weapons, ships, and money, build an alliance that could change the war. But this wasn't easy. In France, Franklin became a celebrity. The French people loved him, his gray hair and simple clothes, his wisdom and wit, his ideas of freedom and equality. He was seen as a man of the people, not a royal puppet. He used charm, diplomacy, and intelligence to slowly gain the trust of the French court. It took years of effort, but finally, in 1778, France signed a treaty with America. This was a turning point in the war. Franklin's diplomacy helped bring French soldiers, warships, weapons, resources that America desperately needed. The war continued for years. But in 1783, the British finally accepted defeat. A peace treaty, called the Treaty of Paris, was signed, and Benjamin Franklin was one of the main negotiators who helped create that treaty. After years of writing, fighting, speaking, and sacrificing, Benjamin Franklin had helped make the impossible happen. America was free. He wasn't just an American hero. He was now a symbol of freedom, intelligence, and courage around the world. In France, they built statues of him. In England, people who once hated him now respected him. In America, he was loved more than ever. He had become a voice for peace, a fighter for liberty, a builder of nations. And yet, his journey was not over. He still had more to give. Part 3. The Final Battles of a Legend. In 1785, after spending nearly a decade in France, Benjamin Franklin, now 79 years old, returned to Philadelphia. He had left as a rebel. He returned as a hero. People lined the streets to welcome him. There were cheers, parades, and celebrations. For many Americans, Franklin was the most respected man alive. But the country he returned to was still new, fragile, and full of problems. There was no strong government. The 13 colonies were now 13 separate states, with different currencies, laws, and interests. There was no national bank, no real unity, and chaos was starting to spread. Benjamin Franklin knew that winning freedom was only the first step. Now came the harder task: building a nation that could survive. In 1787, leaders from across the states gathered in Philadelphia to fix the broken system. This meeting would become one of the most important events in world history. the Constitutional Convention. Its purpose was to create a document that would unite the states, protect freedom, establish laws, and guide future generations. And Benjamin Franklin, now 81 years old, tired and suffering from severe pain and illness, was there every day. He couldn't stand for long. He couldn't walk without help. He was often in agony. But he showed up. He sat quietly, listened carefully, and when he spoke, the room listened. He didn't fight or argue. He used wisdom and calmness to bring unity among men who often disagreed. And when it was time to sign the Constitution, Franklin, the oldest delegate, said something powerful. "I consent to this Constitution because I expect no better, and I am not sure it is not the best." He reminded everyone that no system is perfect, but unity is more important than pride. His signature was added, the Constitution was adopted, and America now had a government, a structure, and a future. Most people don't know this. In his later years, Benjamin Franklin became a powerful voice against slavery. At a time when it was common, even among other founding fathers, to own slaves, Franklin spoke openly and bravely about its evil. He had once accepted slavery like many others, but in his old age, he changed. He saw the truth. He became the president of the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery, and he wrote powerful essays calling for the end of slavery, freedom for all people, education and opportunity for former slaves. He believed, justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Even as his health was failing, he fought for human dignity and equality. This was not politics. This was his heart. During these final years, Franklin also worked on something deeply personal, his autobiography. He didn't write it to show off. He wrote it to teach others how to live better lives. In it, he shared his humble beginnings, his mistakes and failures, his routines, goals and lessons, his 13 personal virtues for self-improvement, his philosophy on life, learning, money, relationships and character. It became one of the most read and loved autobiographies in history. Even today, leaders, thinkers, and learners all over the world read it to learn discipline, build good habits, train their minds, and grow from within. His message was simple. You don't need to be born rich to become great. You need curiosity, discipline, and the desire to serve others. By 1789, Benjamin Franklin was in constant pain. He suffered from gout and kidney stones. He couldn't walk. He was often confined to bed. But he never complained. He continued to write letters, share wisdom, and support leaders like George Washington, who had just become the first president of the United States. Franklin was now almost 84 years old. He had lived a life longer than most ever could in his time. But more than that, he had lived a life that meant something. In 1790, just weeks before his death, Franklin wrote one final letter to the U.S. government. He called for the complete abolition of slavery in America. It was a final act of courage, honesty, and humanity. Even on his deathbed, Franklin was still fighting for justice. On April 17, 1790, Benjamin Franklin died peacefully in his sleep. He was 84 years old. The news of his death spread around the world. In France, thousands of people marched in silence to honor him. In America, church bells rang, streets were silent, and tears were shed. In England, even his old enemies wrote words of respect and honor. More than 20,000 people attended his funeral in Philadelphia, the largest funeral in American history at that time. He was buried next to his wife, Deborah, who had died 16 years earlier. His tombstone, which he had written himself, said, "Benjamin Franklin, printer. Not politician, not scientist, not ambassador, not philosopher, just printer." Because that's how humble he was. Even in death, he wanted to be remembered as a simple man who used words and ideas to build something bigger than himself. Franklin died with no titles, no huge property, no throne. But he left behind a free country, a living constitution, millions of lives improved through invention and wisdom, ideas that still guide the world, a message that anyone from any background can rise and lead. He left behind something bigger than any monument, a mindset. Part 4. The Legacy That Never Died. When Benjamin Franklin died in 1790, the streets of Philadelphia, once filled with his voice, his printing presses, his inventions, his footsteps, fell into silence. But this silence wasn't empty. It was a silence of respect, of loss, and of deep reflection. Because the man was gone, but his impact had only just begun. Let's stop and remember what this one man did in one lifetime. He dropped out of school at age 10, taught himself by reading old books, worked as a printer, editor, and publisher, created Poor Richard's Almanac, which became one of the most read books in history, discovered that lightning is electricity, invented the lightning rod, bifocal glasses, and the Franklin stove, created America's first public library, founded the first fire department, the first hospital, and the first public university in Pennsylvania, formed the first mutual insurance company, negotiated with kings, spoke in parliaments, and helped win America's independence, wrote and signed the Declaration of Independence, Treaty of Paris, and the U.S. Constitution, opposed slavery, inspired people across the world to believe in freedom, knowledge, and progress. And he did all of this with no technology, no formal education, no privilege, no shortcuts, no excuses. How? Because Benjamin Franklin never waited for permission. He never complained about what he didn't have. He used what he had and became more than anyone imagined. Franklin's autobiography, written quietly during his final years, became a global treasure. Why? Because it wasn't just about what he did. It was about how he thought, how he lived, and how anyone could become great. He didn't say, "Look how amazing I am." He said, "Here's what I learned. Now you try." He listed 13 personal virtues that guided his daily life. 1. Temperance, control over food and drink. 2. Silence, speak only what's helpful. Third order, organize your time and space. Fourth resolution, decide, then act. 5. Frugality, spend only on what helps. Sixth industry, always stay productive. 7. Sincerity, be honest and kind. 8. Justice, do what is right. 9. Moderation,